Tuesday with Thompson, with the host of the Pete Thompson Show, Saturday mornings from 8 to 10 a.m. on 97.3 ESPN.com. Pete Thompson, he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline for another edition of Tuesday with Thompson. PT, what's happening, pal?
MG, how are you? Did you have breakfast with the PT last Saturday?
I did. I was up. I got in about 10 after 8. I missed the first 10 minutes. What did I miss?
Oh, well, that was where Hunter and I were talking about all the things that have taken place, in the last few days about the Flyers and did they move down in the draft to get their guy, but is it the right guy? And the Phillies and their mess. And, when the highlight is that Chase Utley finally had a catch with Mac from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That's not good. A lot of highlights. So.
Yeah, well, the Phillies finally won last night, but I thought the story was what happened before the game, Peter, where Matt Klentak had to come out and basically tell everybody, hey, get off my back. We're not firing the manager or anybody else for that matter.
Yeah, that the dreaded vote of confidence, right? I mean, sometimes the vote of confidence is a good thing, and other times the vote of confidence is a bad thing. And he basically came out and said, we're not making any moves. Meanwhile, the Mets clubhouse is a complete mess, too. I mean, it's when the storyline for the series is the managers off the field, not their job, or the players on the field, that's two flawed teams.
Yeah, well, Klentak, he said yesterday that basically, look, it's not happening. He left a tiny little bit of wiggle room, but I found it interesting that with the Mets in town, that they decided to jump out ahead of the Mets in dysfunction and say, hey, we've got our own issues that we're going to address, instead of letting maybe the Mets issues overshadow their own issues. You know what I mean?
Well, sure. I mean, and they easily could have done that, used all the dysfunctionality of the Mets to sort of take care of their own stuff in-house and not have to come out and say something. But I think Kapler heard the noise. I mean, Kapler especially heard the noise, but I think Klentak heard the noise too and knew, the slide that they're on is quite epic, So I think he felt the need to come out and say, look, stop asking. It's not going to happen. And, I guess they have a pretty tight bond between them because this is the guy, after all, that Klentak picked. This is the way Klentak thinks analytically. And with the way, that's it. So it's kind of like, Ron Hextall was tied to Dave Haxtell, right? Well, Ron wasn't going to fire Haxtall, and when Ron got fired, everybody thought that's why. They told him to fire Hack, and he wouldn't. Well, that wasn't necessarily the case, but the bond between the team leader and the general manager is pretty tight. I think in this case, that's a factor.
Yeah, well, so Klentak said Kapler will be his manager the rest of the season. He also threw support behind the entire coaching staff and that there'll be no internal changes. I'm imagining, though, PT, that he had to have go to the owner and say, hey, look, do you want me to go down and put out these fires, right? Because the next question that we discussed yesterday was, this was before all this happened, right? We had the poll questions out there. Look, they got swept. They've lost 7 in a row. What should happen next? And it was make a trade, fire Klentak, fire Kapler, or is it just a June swoon? And, of course, fire Kapler won. Well, he came out and said that's not going to happen. How about the GM? It sounds like he's firmly entrenched as well for him to go down and make this, he's got to have the blessing of the ownership group to make this statement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Middleton is, listen, there was years, and you remember that when the Phillies ownership group was absent and removed. John Middleton is neither of those things. He's not absent and he's not removed. I think he's involved in a lot of decisions, and I think that Klentak has to go to him and say, hey, listen, this is where we're at. I'm just going to keep you in the loop here. I think they can turn around, but, you're the boss. And I'm sure that Middleton must have said, okay, what you believe. I mean, look, they came out last night, and if that's any indication, they snapped their losing streak, and they went out and banged out a bunch of hits, right? So, yeah. I mean,
for one night only.
They can turn it around. Yeah, is it a one-off, or, that's to be determined.
Yeah, we'll find out. But I'll tell you what, they've lost 10 games in the National League East standings since May the 29th. I mean, that's hard to do.
Yeah, I saw that stat was unbelievable. How far and how fast they slid in such a short amount of time. Plus, I think, our guy Boop Stats that we both follow, Bob Patrone Jr., that has all the great little nuggets of information. I think he had a stat up, if I'm not mistaken, that the Marlins, that's the team, their 370 winning percentage coming in was the worst winning percentage of any team that came in and swept the team, whether it was at Citizens Bank Park or Veterans Stadium or ever to come in and sweep the Phillies on a series.
Oof, right. I know that the Marlins aren't very good. The Mets aren't very good. The Phillies haven't been playing very good, but they could maybe, they got a 4-gamer here with this Mets team. So let's see what happens. The Mets got their own problems. So the manager tries to essentially call out one of the media members. Then one of the pitchers tries to fight him, and then he's forced to apologize, but he doesn't really apologize correctly. So then he's got to apologize a second time, PT. This sounds like something you would do.
Yeah, only Mickey Callaway could screw up the apology, right? Because he went in and he didn't really apologize. So I think they realized, dude, he apologized to the beat writer, but he didn't really apologize for his actions when he had the press conference. So I think they basically called him in, and then they called all the media again. Oh, yeah. Listen,
this is
epic. For the Phillies, just be happy you're not the Mets.
Yeah, well, guess what? To me, this reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where Costanza's trying to get fired in his bodysuit, man. He's driving around in the parking lot with the World Series trophy dragging from the bumper of the car, shooting out on a megaphone. This is Callaway right now.
That is Mickey Callaway right now. And so maybe he's the guy that gets fired first and then takes some of the heat off the Phillies, the attention off the Phillies. I don't think anybody nationally.
No, because if the Mets fire their guy first, then the attention goes right to the Phillies, right?
Right, that's true. The spotlight moves right on them. Who's next? But, we live in such a short cycle, too. That's the beautiful thing of as bad as you think you've had it, there's always somebody else that's got it worse.
Well, the Phillies, so let me ask you, because, we used to do the show every single day together, and we'd have, the more of a pulse on what's going on out there. Now, I don't know how much day-to-day, night-to-night, how, connected you feel with this team, because it's weird. I feel like there's an interesting, thing going on with this Phillies team where they went out and got more players, but the team isn't as good. Last year the record was better, but nobody really liked that team. It was that team doesn't have any personality. So what is your connection with this year's team?
Well, and I was watching, up until about 2 weeks ago, I was watching every game every night, wire to wire, and I'd watch a little of the post-game show. And as they continued to lose, that gradually became we've got this in the DVR. We could watch that and just check back on the score. And you'd check back and the score would be 6-1 or 7-2, or, they'd get their ass kicked. And so you might I'm not going to lie to you. I've had a disconnect with them as they started to just continually lose. Now, last night I watched a decent amount, enough to see them get up, but I didn't go wire to wire. I saw they had a lead, and again, dip back in that DVR. So I'm a little disconnected right now. They've got to win some games for me to be tied back in, and I think that's where the fans are too. I put a Twitter question up, Mike, on Sunday. I said a new low for the Phillies, swept by the lowly Marlins. What do you think the biggest issue is? And, guy said Gabe. Somebody else said the loss of touch is hitting the team harder than folks realize. It's not about the numbers. It's more about the leadership, the attitude, the hustle. And I know you weren't sold on McCutchen when he was signed, but I do think that what Andrew McCutchen brought in terms of leadership, he was one of the few guys in the clubhouse that sort of brought that leadership, and clearly they're
I definitely, he exceeded what I thought he would bring statistically speaking in terms of, that impact. Now, could he have kept it up? And in fact, it's something that I questioned. They were 10 games over 500 at one point, and one of the questions I asked Peter was, can McCutchen continue to produce out of the leadoff spot for a full season like he is right now? And he wasn't. Look, McCutchen was once the MVP of the league. He wasn't putting up MVP type of numbers, but he was steady, and we're finding out how important. Did you see on Twitter last night they won, and he tweeted out a video of himself and how pumped up he was that his teammates won and that he's not even playing? That shows you what kind of man they're losing.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, a guy, Michael, on Twitter said, look, they lost their 2 starting outfielders. They lost people in the bullpen. The starting pitchers are all bad except for Eflin. Things caught up to them. And that's another factor, too. You know, Aaron Nola last season was incredible. Aaron Nola this season is human, right? Jake Arrieta last season was pretty good. Jake Arrieta this season, not as good. You know, you've got they don't have a 5th starter. Heck, by the time you get to number 3 starter, you've got issues and question marks. So I mean,
well, Nola hasn't been Nola either. That's been another big, massive problem, I think.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, and that's the thing. Nola had a career year last year, and that's why they call them career years. You only get them once every so often in your career, maybe twice. I mean, it is crazy, though, because the thing I kept saying about Friday night's game last Friday night was that Nola had struck out 10, and in the notes the next, like after the game that the Phillies put out for the PR notes, they talked about that was his 10th 10 strikeout game of his career with the Phillies. And, like, the leader was Steve Carlton with, like, 70. And you sit there and think back to yourself, man, that Carlton was really good. Like, you know, Nola has one good year, and you're like, oh, he should win the Cy Young. And you think back to when I was a kid, and I'd go, I mean, even the 72 Phillies, right? When Carlton would pitch, at least they knew one game a week they would win.
Yeah, well, Nola was third in the Cy Young race last year, and it's evident that he's not the same guy. And I don't know what's lacking or what's missing, but he is 6-1, which surprised me. Like, the other day I was thinking to myself, man, if Nola was just a little bit better than he was a year ago, that might be 3 or 4 wins. And right now, 3 or 4 extra wins would be a pretty big deal. But he's 6-1, so I was surprised by that. It's the runs that he's given up that has been the big problem there. And then the drop-off. Eflin, you can't really say, yes, I believe that Eflin's going to be a big game playoff pitcher if it gets to that point. And Arrieta, I don't know. I mean, I was not a guy who killed the Arrieta deal last year. But in year number 2, he has not gotten, much better. I mean, last year was like, look, he had that really good month of, I guess, June it was, but he had some bad months, and he was bad at the end of the year for $25 million. You would probably hope for a little bit more than what he's given you.
Yeah, I would think so. And that's the thing is that, at times Arrieta has been the guy to bark and call out the team and say, you're not doing stuff right. And yet I don't know how much you can yell when you've got a 4.12 ERA, you're 6-6. You just haven't been able to, Arrieta's had that one inning where he'll be cruising along for a couple and then he gets roughed up. But he is and always has been a guy that induces the ground ball and gets guys to keep the ball on the ground. Well, let's look at the number of home runs that he's given up this season. 15 already through not that many games, right? So, I mean, he's not getting the ground ball outs that he's been able to get in the past, and that's part of the problem for Jake Arrieta this season.
Yeah, all right. Tuesday with Thompson, with Pete Thompson, host of the Pete Thompson Show. And it would have been nice to have this conversation to hear what Ricky Bo had to say about it, but he ghosted you on Saturday.
He apologized. I got a text message later on Saturday and said that, according to Ricky Bo, he left his phone on the desk at work the night before. Now, I guess that's possible. Okay, so we are going to try to have Ricky Bo on again this Saturday.
Wow.
However, just because I'm not going to play with fire that much, we're going to have him on the 9 o'clock hour. We're going to give him a little bit of a later chance to
you technically believe that the hour and time that he was scheduled for may been a little too early for him.
I think that 8:20 might have been a little too early for him, but we'll give him 40 extra minutes this week, and we'll try to have him on. That's one guy I'm chasing down, and then of course with all the Flyers picks and all the moves in, I'd really like to get Sam Carchidi on from the Inquirer to talk about what the Flyers have done, because I think first of all, he's at the draft. He sat in front of Chuck Fletcher to find out what his thinking was, and the Flyers have made a lot of moves since both the draft, and then they've been moving guys left and right, too. So I'd like to have Sam Carchidi on. That's 2 for sure. I'm working on some other guys. It's probably a little too early to talk about them, but I'm working on a couple other guests, too. Plus, the one thing I want to do, Mike, that I didn't do in week 1 is really make sure people are welcome to call in. I don't know if I gave the text message board enough, but I think sometimes people forget what the actual phone number is. I mean, they remember it when the contest is up, but, 609-573-3776 hasn't changed in forever.
Yeah, well, that's Saturday morning, 8 to 10, and we'll get you some more details on that. And the PT will be back on Friday to really, hopefully you have that full lineup of guests for the people. So, I had a lot of positive reviews of that. Oh, I enjoyed hearing the PT on Saturday morning.
I like to hear that. Now, that's what we're calling it, breakfast with the PT. And
yeah, what were some of the breakfast answers for the I've never seen this is a new thing, the PT up at that hour. So I never really have actually experienced breakfast with the PT.
Yeah, actually, and you're right. A lot of my breakfasts from my in my career have been the 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning when the establishments close, kind of deal. Yeah, there were so many answers. I've got them up here. This one was a breakfast burrito, was like one of the first answers to come in. Mushroom, onion, and cheddar omelet with a side of scrapple. Pork roll and American cheese omelet. Who else said bacon and cheese? Now, that was Bob Groth. I liked that. I never thought to go bacon in my omelet.
Oh, that's one of my go-tos, Peter.
The bacon?
My 3 go-to omelets. Bacon and spinach, no cheese. All right, that's one.
Okay.
Like the Italian sausage, red roasted peppers.
Italian sauce.
Yep, is the other one. And then sometimes I'll do the sausage, mushrooms, and red roasted peppers. They're my 3 go-to omelets.
I'm a
big omelet guy.
Me too. Dave Weinberg tweeted in from Cape May. He was having his he tweeted in the next day because he was having his Sunday omelet. I'm sure it's like church omelet beach in that order, Western omelet with grits on the side, freshly squeezed OJ, and a large coffee. That was Matt on Twitter. A lot of people coming in. In fact, we got so many diverse answers. One guy tweeted in and said, "With all due respect, mine is anything that doesn't involve killing an innocent animal so that I can kill my fat gut."
Well, I get very conflicted. I love breakfast food, so French toast with any bananas and peaches and all that kind of jazz. I have a really I got a really tough time when it comes to great breakfast joints. You know what I mean? So I was very digging the people's responses there. But hey, did you see this video of Lenny Dykstra, by the way?
The one where he's in his backyard, mowing with the cigarette.
He's got
the
the
coffee.
cigarette
I watched it.
in the You think that was coffee in that tumbler?
No. It looked like a coffee cup, but I don't think it was coffee.
No, man. I said, you were around the 93 Phillies a lot. I mean, this guy, what a crackpot.
That's exactly what he looked like, too. He'd kind of waddle around the clubhouse afterwards, and, he'd tell the clubby, he'd just hold up 2 fingers, and the guy would bring him 2 glasses of, I thought it was like gin and tonic. It was a clear liquid. In fact, I tweeted to Lenny Dykstra at one point in time, I said, "Hey, I covered the 93 Phillies, and I know you used to always have you'd tell the clubhouse guy to bring you 2 drinks right off the field, and I said, you were getting changed, and he'd bring you 2 things. What was it? Because I wanted to, finally have confirmation. And Lenny Dykstra actually responded and wrote back, milk.
I could see him with his dentures not in, smiling and laughing. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Did you see that story of him, the video of him searching for his dentures in the dumpster at the Jersey Mike's sub shop?
Now, that one I did not see, but Lenny is a continual treasure trove of dysfunctionality. It almost is sad. I think, isn't he kind of also having a Twitter campaign against the Phillies, trying to get added to the Phillies Wall of Fame? They don't want any part of that.
Not only that, he had said that he would be interested in being the manager.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Well,
he said
notebook,
he tweeted last night that once they announced that Lenny Dykstra, I can't believe I didn't bring this up earlier. So once they decided that they were going to bring back Kapler or that he wasn't getting fired, Dykstra tweeted, "Let me spend 3 days with the GM. I'll talk him out of this."
Is that with dentures or without?
Just hanging out, having a go. Remember the story though?
I gotta say, I bet Lenny knows a lot about the game. I don't. That's the one area of Lenny Dykstra's life that I would say he's on point. Right? For all his other dysfunctionality and all the things that he's done wrong, and leaving Wayne Gretzky's mansion a complete mess, and beg, borrow, and stealing like people's credit cards so he could fill Gulf streams of money he didn't have, and pretending to be some stock market genius, which, quite frankly, I don't think anybody is, right? The one thing I would trust Lenny Dykstra on is actual baseball and hitting.
Yeah, but not during a game.
No. And maybe not with my big league team that I love.
Right. No, you think well, you remember the time when he was like he was on the HBO Real Sports, and like what was the guy, Bernie Goldberg, interviewed him about being like this amazing like financial advisor or
That's
like
the thing.
Remember that?
He was portraying himself to be like the next coming of Jim Cramer.
Jim Cramer endorsed him.
Yeah, well, that was a mistake.
He was saying how much of a genius he was, that he was like this great, the next great, financial guy.
Well, I think he made some good picks, and that's the thing. You can get on a hot streak in the financial world like you can in sports, but ultimately, Lenny Dykstra was proven not to be this guru, or else he wouldn't be in the backyard of some house in Linden, New Jersey, cutting knee-high lawn.
What does he call it? The premier house in Linden?
Yes, that's what he calls it.
All right, Tuesday with Thompson, Pete Thompson. By the way, did you hear this 911 call from the Le'Veon Bell story the other day?
No, I heard you talking about it yesterday when I was in the car a little bit, and I never did get to hear the call. What was his issue again? What, he got robbed or something?
He was in the house, right, and he had two girlfriends over. And he left the house to go to the gym and work out for a long period of time. When he got home, they had stolen his belongings, like jewelry, money, shoes, clothes. So he calls 911, and he tells them, I got all these things stolen from me. So the 911 operator asks, like, what's the value of this stuff? He's like, I don't know, like $1 million. So she then proceeds to say, how would you describe these young ladies? And he's like, the one girl's 23. The 911 operator, she asked, are they white, black, or Hispanic? And he says, well, they're both mixed. So she goes on to ask for some more descriptions, and he's kind of answering the questions. So I guess, the 911 operator now wants to send someone on the lookout for these people, right?
All right.
So she asked Bell, okay, well, what were they wearing? And he says, well, they were in my bed.
In other words, they weren't wearing anything.
Exactly. What was the 23-year-old wearing? Well, she was in my bed. So yeah, she had nothing on. Well, what about the other young lady? And he's like, well, same thing. She didn't have anything on either. So these two girls are at his house, having a little fun, and then robbed him blind, Peter.
Oh, that's terrible and hilarious all at the same time.
The call is epic, though. His reaction is so priceless.
Oh, how do you put that out on the police radio? How do you put that bolo out? Attention,
right.
Officers, be on the lookout for a 23 and 22-year-old mixed female wearing nothing.
Two naked ladies walking around with shoes, jewelry, and a man's clothing.
Right. Might be pulling a wheelie suitcase full of all of Le'Veon Bell's belongings.
All right. That's Tuesday with Thompson here on the Sports Bash.